It's the Brad and John Show.
The Brad and John Show for Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. This is the B block, which means we start about 7:20. And what we need... I'm sorry. I just saw it on the computer here. I can't resist, John. Don't be mad at me, but...
John Cone Best, he's a man of taste. He's got a thing for a certain type of grace. He don't care about diamonds or pearls. All he wants is a girl with comfortable shoes. He loves women in comfortable shoes.
I'm sorry, John. I haven't played that in a while. It's the John Combest theme song.
For folks who are unaware, first of all, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. And also, Brad created a fantastic song last year called John Combest Loves Women in Comfortable Shoes, because I do not.
Yeah, he does.
I do not. Women should not be wearing comfortable shoes, at least not in the presence of a man with which they either want to breed or spend significant amount of time.
So none of the Mary Janes are flats, right? That's what you're saying?
No, Mary Janes can work. I have kind of a Mary Janes thing that goes back to, well, I won't be specific about who she was. But anyway, Brad, thank you for that jog down memory lane.
Okay, couple things to talk about first. Okay, well, we're going to go back to the election thing again. I think that, Ricky Schroeder is correct. They need to move that April because Mark Cox was talking about this morning, that the city voting turnout was like 16% and the county voting percent was 14%. I don't know the exact numbers. They were dismal. They were in the teens, okay? And you figure that means that less than 20% of the people who are and that's just of the registered voters. That's not of the total population. It's just the registered voters. Less than 20% turned out. And when you look at how important these elections are with school boards and mayors and things like that. By the way, do you have Cottleville? Did Mayor Ronkowski get reelected? Do you have that in front?
No idea. I don't have the every election result.
I'll have to find out if I can find that.
And Brad, to your point, real quick, Brad, just real quick though about turnout. You brought up a good point, which is friend of the show, Christoferguson. You can follow him on Twitter, CHRISTOFERGUSON. It's like Christopher and Ferguson together. He says, quote, St. Louis has a new mayor because of trouble with basic city services.
No kidding.
Not because of terrible policies and grift that ran the city into the ground. The apathy is only broken by inconvenience and not by much, really, looking at the turnout. Like, talk about summarizing what happened in the city by 4 sentences. People, first of all, look at the turnout and look at how dismal the turnout was. Second of all, Chris's point is people aren't offended by somebody getting a little grift, a little development money. It's basic incompetence, not being able to plow the streets, not being able to pick up trash. So let's not read too much into the city results about people are taking a stand for principle and ethics over grift, because that's not true at all.
Well, the sad part of this is I'm looking at these election results. I was talking St. Charles, St. Charles, Proposition SCCD, Wentzville School District, blah, 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 blah. Let me go down the thing here real quick. Talk a little bit more. Can you talk about something else while I look here?
Oh, yeah, sure. So let's applaud the fact that Brad went to the St. Louis Business Expo yesterday. And I look forward to hearing a quick summary. For folks who don't know, they advertise on Westplex 107.1 every year. Brad has a long-standing relationship with those folks. I believe Brad's gone for at least the last 15 years or so. And you might think that a business expo is just a place for the Brad Hildebrands of the world to stand around and chit-chat and write plans in the sand that'll get wiped away and that will never happen. But according to Brad, people actually go there and do real business. And actually, according to Brad's anecdotes yesterday, they'll actually go to the St. Louis Business Expo and get hired. They'll actually hire people. You could actually get a job by going to these expos.
I'm telling you. I mean, okay, by the way, I just found it. Unfortunately, I liked him, but he lost. Mayor Ronkowski lost to Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson had this is sad when you show how little voting there is. This is in Cottleville. There are 773 votes for Stephen Thompson and 608 votes for Bob Ronkowski. If you know what's going on in Cottleville, it's sort of sad. I find this interesting that people can move into an area, but then when more people move into that area, they say, we don't want you. There are too many people here.
That's human nature, right?
Right. Once upon a time, the population of Cottleville was less than 100. And I'm not talking in the 1800s that it was less than 100. We're talking probably back in the mid to late 1900s, the population of Cottleville was under 100. Okay, it's now like 8,000 or 9,000, and they just keep building more places. As a matter of fact, if you know the area, if you drive along 364, when you get west of the new interchange there, which is also fueling a lot of growth in St. Charles County.
Okay, let's go. Let's get back to the main point.
The new Guttermouth exit. They pulled up out of the floodplain, like I think literally like a square mile out of the floodplain. They built houses. Every time I drive by there, it's like, okay, are they dropping these houses from the sky? Because you drive by one week and there's 3 houses. You drive by the next week, there's 6 houses. 2 weeks later, there's 20
I know
houses.
exactly what you're talking about.
And it's to the point where the interesting part of this is that people loved Cottleville because it had that small town feel. I don't, except for like the downtown area of Cottleville, which has gotten to be like a traffic jam where they purposely narrowed it down the 2 lanes. You come through there in Highway N. I think it's turned into a mess. Now, I'm going to have people going like, oh, you can't believe you said that. But it's, once again, it's to the point where everybody's jumping they're jumping on the bandwagon, and everybody's got to move to Cottleville. And for years, I don't know if it is anymore, but for years, the number 1 growing city in the state of Missouri was Cottleville by percentage. Every year it was the same thing because there are more and more subdivisions and more apartment buildings and more this and more that. And the guy who sort of is the unofficial mayor of Cottleville is a guy by the name of Mike Wright. Do you know who Mike Wright is? And it's not
I don't know him.
It's not Wright. It's REIT or something like that. He pronounces it Mike Wright. Mike Wright and I go way back because when I owned my lighting business, he owned a place down in North City on Broadway, up the street from where my great aunt and great uncle owned their bar, Fritz's Fine Foods, and he had a place called North Broadway Car Wash and Saloon and Car Wash or something like that, where literally it was a bar, and they bought the building next door, and they cut a big hole and put a picture window in the bar so that this were the executives from downtown St. Louis, and I'm not making this up. They would hire young ladies who would wash cars, and you would sit in the bar and watch the young ladies wash your car through the big glass window, and that was one of the.
What was the attraction of that, Brad? I mean, the women that were hired were probably square built.
No,
you might have called some of them by the proper noun butch. I mean, by like a name, right?
No,
so they were probably square-built, maybe hefty women, right?
Well, I don't know if you know this or not. Me being a veteran of spending a lot of time in Sauget, and no, I never worked at the clubs. I was flying traffic. We were on the north side of the airport. If you know anything about the airport over there in Sauget, the part of the airport's in Sauget. Part of the airport is in what is now Cahokia Heights. Do you know the difference between Cahokia and Cahokia Heights?
No, I don't, Brad. Is one of them higher than the other? Does one of them have Indian burial grounds?
Cahokia annexed a couple other cities, and essentially there are a couple cities on the east side. They're gone. I think Washington Park is gone. I think that's one of them, and it's now called Cahokia Heights. But anyway, the one of the strip clubs over there in Sauget used to have the car wash for charity, where the girls they put up like a bunch of tents and turned it into a tunnel. And you would be in your car, and I'm not making this up, and the girls were topless, and you would stay in your car as the girls watched your car, and you did that for charity. See, John, you live in St. Louis County. You live a sheltered life. I'm the guy that has no problem with traversing the entire St. Louis metro area. 1 minute I'll be in Sauget, the next minute I'll be in Wildwood, where so many people. And it was funny. This came up yesterday at the Business Expo about people talking about, well, we never go there because that's inside the 270 circle, that kind of stuff, But anyway, I don't know how I got talking about that. How did I get talking about that?
You were bobbing and weaving on various topics, Brad. I'm not sure exactly where you're going. Brad, can we take just one moment and mention the passing of Nick Pistor?
You sent that to me yesterday, and that was very sad. We just talked about him like last month, late last month, about how he was campaigning for a spot at City Hall.
Yeah, March 11th was actually the show that we talked about it. So less than a month ago, for folks who haven't seen this, former Post-Dispatch reporter, City Hall reporter Nick Pistor passed away suddenly. He was only 43 years old. There's a piece in the Post-Dispatch about it. I know Fox 2 has a piece. It's not clear. The Post-Dispatch describes it as he had a sudden acute illness. Friends quoted in the Post-Dispatch say that they just saw him within the last few days, and he seemed perfectly healthy. So it seems like something struck him very recently, but really sad. He was and the Post-Dispatch mentions something which is, I guess, kind of a little known secret. And Brad, it's something that I never mentioned on the air just because I didn't know how many people knew. But Nick was former president of the Missouri Federation of College Republicans. And so I met Nick back in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, because I was involved with Missouri Federation and things like that. And Nick went to SLU. So I had friends that overlapped with Nick. And I always thought it was funny that somebody who was once president of a college Republicans group would go on and write for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. But it's really sad. And we talked on March 11th. I read one of his books and purchased it for a family member of mine who he wrote a book on, President Lincoln. And anyway, Nick was an author, and we talked about that last time. And it's always sad to lose somebody like this. But when it's so sudden and unexpected, Nick retweeted our show just last month, Brad, when we talked about it.
I know.
Like, that was the last interaction I had with him.
And I think he followed me. I think he followed me on Twitter as well too. I'm pretty sure that was one because he made that he talked about the fact that we talked about him and the whole bit. And wasn't his book on like Lincoln photography or something like that? Wasn't it the one?
Yeah. It was about, as I recall, there were two folks who really wanted to be like the official photographers, and they were photography rivals, so to speak. So it was about those men's, rivalry to shoot Lincoln, to actually photograph Lincoln. And you got to forgive me because it's been, I guess, 10 years probably since I've read the book. But just a great historical look. And he wrote a second book as well. And he was talking about how he's writing another book on city government. And he was in a Sarah Fensky or maybe Ryan Kroll piece about, he wanted, for folks who don't recall or who just listening to us for the first time, Nick wanted to do a story on why the St. Louis Post-Dispatch has a rent-free office in City Hall. Why does the Post-Dispatch, this vestige of the olden days when the media would have an office there? And Nick pointed out that the Globe Democrat used to have an office, and now it's used to store holiday decorations. So right. Nick kind of wanted to look into the lease. He was a rabble-rouser. A guy that's close to Tashara Jones, and that story called him a mischief maker. And we lost a really good one, Brad.
And what you said was interesting because I remember you talking about this before. You're going like, okay, hold on. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, and he worked at the Post-Dispatch? How does that work?
Yeah. And so, the Post did a good job in this piece, and this was put together by David Hunn, of going through kind of how he started working essentially as a freelancer in the early 2000s. And then he would work on the Voter's Guide, and then he was hired to first cover the Metro East, Brad, one of your favorite areas, and then City Hall. So I knew him from back in those days because, obviously I was still doing my website, and he would send me stuff. And, as I always say, I don't like the city stuff, but he would send me good kind of, tongue-in-cheek, I think I'm allowed to say it now, conservative right-wing stuff. And that's how I got to know him.
Sad, especially 43. Much, but too young to pass away. Okay, a story that I saw this morning, which I thought was interesting. A federal judge has ruled against the White House for banning the Associated Press. What do you think about this, John?
Oh, I think that, this goes back to the whole White House Correspondents Association thing. And there's a new sheriff in town. And I would probably, if I was running the Trump White House, I would probably have a pretty open policy, and I would let the AP and I would let others in, and I probably wouldn't be too petty about it. But I think, the Trump team probably has other ideas.
This goes back to the aspect when Trump renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, and he had a fight with AP because AP has this book called the AP Style Book, which it's more and more a relic as we go past because less and less true journalists are using
fewer and fewer do. Fewer and fewer.
Right, excuse me. And essentially the AP style book is how you're supposed to write news. They, talking about, if you don't write news our way, you're not writing it the right way, okay? Which is sort of sad to me because of the fact that if you ever read anything on Outkick,
Yeah, I do.
It's a very distinctive writing style, which to me is very refreshing, and it's not the staid and starched collar journalism of the AP style book. Essentially, when the AP style book would not recognize that it's not the Gulf of America, it's in their eyes is the Gulf of Mexico. That's when Trump said, "Kick them out," and they got kicked out of the press conference. And the interesting part of it is the judge ruled that even though it's a non-public event, which it is, you just can't walk into the press room at the White House. That's very, very, very highly regulated. Even outside of the White House Press Association or even the president himself, highly regulated by the Secret Service, as you can imagine. They just don't want anybody in there.
Yeah, for sure.
The judge essentially said they have to allow them in. So it's going to be sort of interesting. But they didn't say where they had to sit. Maybe they put them in the closet or something like that in the bathroom and give them like a speaker they can listen to or something like that. Who knows? It's interesting. Trump world is always interesting. And John, one more time, who won that board seat out in Wentzville again? What was that guy's name again?
I think it was Yappy Yard Sign.
Yappy Yard Sign.
He was known by the nickname Yappy. And it was because, ironically, he talked a lot, but he refused to talk on talk radio. He didn't want to do radio ads or anything like that.
No, I think it was Jeremy Way who bought the advertising. He bought that back in February. I just looked at my records. He bought the advertising in February. His ad started 2 weeks ago yesterday, and he won in Wentzville.
And Brad, he got that from word of mouth. Did you send him a direct mail piece?
I did not, John.
Okay, so
John's
he
gonna
got
make fun of
from
me again.
So people in the community said we like Westplex 107.1.
Yes.
Should advertise on that station.
And
what do you think would have been results, Brad, if you had sent a simple mail piece to every local candidate running for office in St. Charles County?
John, don't take this the wrong way, but your buddy, I guess is your buddy. What's the guy?
I take it so wrong, Brad. I don't know who you're talking about, but I take it the wrong way.
Tom Smith. Aren't you buddy with Tom Smith?
I've known Tom since 1996, yeah.
Okay, Tom has a formula. And nothing against Tom. And once again, I guess I will admit that if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But Tom has a formula, which I say is every year is getting more and more outdated. And once again, I should say that. I was a guest speaker at the Republican Central Committee's candidate day. I've done it twice now, and I always
2 years in a row, back to back.
Well, not 2 years in a row. It was several years in between.
Okay, get to it. And Tom would also probably tell people. I'm going to interrupt you, Brad. Your whole complaint is that Tom always says you need to have yard signs. They're very important. I think Tom would also say, I'm not speaking for Tom, but generally campaign people would say, yes, and if you also have a ton of money, you should do radio on stations that matter.
No, he wouldn't say that at all because his whole pitch is yard signs and door knocking. I mean, that was the if you could synopsize, not me, but all the other guests there, the guest speakers, and not so much in Mike Summer because he was more about political campaigns and stuff like that. Yard signs and door knocking. And see, my complaint is that if I put up a yard sign for, Jim Smith, gutter cleaning, the sign Nazi in St. Peter's is going to take it down, but I put up a yard sign for John Combesk for France South School District, and people are going to go, oh, good, he's got a yard sign. We got to vote for him.
And if you got a problem with stolen yard signs, by the way, contact Attorney General Elad Gross, who advertised on Westplex 107.1.
No, he didn't.
And he got elected Attorney General, right?
No, he didn't. Now you're making fun of me. Okay, here we go.
I'm not making fun of you, Brad.